Hello, everyone, and welcome to Breaking the Meta. I am Mike Winson. Today, we are meeting with a very special guest. His name is Jeff Pixley. I'm always me saying names is always an interesting time. I picked the wrong career for that, but that's fine. He's running for Oklahoma's 4th congressional district. And we're so excited to talk about how he hopes to get into Washington and help make some big changes that get this country going in a direction that we really needed to go. Hello, Jeff. Welcome on in.
Hey, thank you for having me. I really appreciate the invitation.
Absolutely. So the first thing that I like to ask everyone to do, just because we're talking to a lot of different people that are running for office, is if you could let everyone who's listening or watching know what areas of Oklahoma are encompassed in Oklahoma's 4th district, and then just give us a little bit about you and why you decided to run for Congress in the first place.
Okay, great. Yeah, so the Oklahoma's 4th district runs from the very south end of Oklahoma City and essentially runs down I-35 and I-44, encompassing Midwest City, Del City, Moore, Norman, which is one of the big towns, Lawton, Ada, and it goes all the way down to the border with Texas. There are 14 counties represented in our district, and it's a pretty good mix of rural and urban. Oklahoma is a little bit gerrymandered, but it's not insanely gerrymandered. So it's a pretty fair district. And the background on me, and you see me, I'm sitting in the museum I built to myself in my office. So anybody that knows me at all knows that the first thing out of my mouth is always about my service in the Air Force. So I'm an Air Force guy. I spent my whole adult life in the Air Force. And that journey really began before I understood what the military was. I was raised by Air Force veterans. Both my mom and dad were in the Air Force before I was born. Of course, their parents were the generation of World War II. So I kind of grew up in places not unlike this, kind of a shrine built to those who had served our country in World War II. And my parents had such pride in their service. So early in my life, it was obvious to me one way to get the pride and affection from mom and dad and from family members was related to service. So I was kind of hooked early, and then I don't know how old I was, probably shy of 10 years old. I saw a fighter airplane fly by, and I'm like, "What's that all about?"
That's what I'm gonna do.
Dad's like, "That's a fighter airplane. You want to do that? You can go, be an officer in the Air Force. You can go do that for a living." So that became my mission. I was never a kid who wanted to be a doctor or be a pro ball player. I didn't have the skills to be a pro ball player, of course. I just wanted to be a fighter pilot. So all the way through growing up, that's what I said I was going to do. If anybody asked me, that's what I told them. And then when I was about I actually was 16 years old. I just started my senior year of high school. I was still 16. And I came to this stark realization that despite having had that dream and done stuff like being in Civil Air Patrol, which is this really cool program for youth, leadership program for youth, I was 6 months away from graduating high school. There was no chance I was going to college. Even if I could get in, which I probably couldn't, my parents couldn't afford it. I came from pretty modest means. Luckily, about the time that happened, instead of my dream of flying jets being shattered, the enlisted recruiter in my town caught me on campus, and she's like, "You should enlist in the Air Force, and you can go spend a couple of years enlisted, and then go get your degree and go on to fly fighters." I enlisted without hesitation. Right out of high school, I went to basic training, and although she may have undersold how complicated it would be to take that route, which is what recruiters do. Bless her. She was doing the right thing, right? Yeah. Anybody that has ever been enlisted in the military knows what I'm talking about. But the beauty is those 4 years I spent enlisted gave me a chance to grow up a lot. It gave me a chance to mature a lot. I got to see a little bit of the world. I got a chance to start my family. So by the time I came to college here in Oklahoma to pursue my degree, doing that ROTC path that she had mentioned, I had a wife and I had a kid and I had my crap together. I was more squared away, and I came here to college and crushed it. And ROTC was great. And then I went off to become a lieutenant. I went off to fly fighters. So over my shoulder here, seeing F-16. I flew F-16s for the Air Force. Did that in combat. A couple different operational missions doing that, or a couple operational assignments doing that. And then, as happens, you go to staff jobs and command jobs. So I spent some time as an instructor pilot down in San Antonio. I was a commander of an Air Force basic training squadron. I spent some time working for Air Force One, which is a super gig. If you ever, if you've ever been around Air Force One, I didn't fly the airplane. I was a small airplane guy, but I was on the advanced team for Air Force One. I got to work on President Obama's re-election campaign in 2012. Got to travel the world for the president, for the White House, and got to be part of a really important kind of no-fail mission. And then
that's really cool.
And then I ran basic training for the Air Force, which is where all my gray hair comes from. And then after I did that, I got the opportunity to come here back to Oklahoma. So back where I went to college, I got to be the commander of the unit that I was leading, or that I was a cadet in back in the 1900s. And being an ROTC commander for a colonel is a really good gig, because it's a chance to take all your years of experience and passion for the service and hand it over to the next generation of soon to be officers. And I just love the job. And I felt like the difference I was making in the Air Force was really highest right there at the very end. Yeah. And it was supposed to be a 3-year gig. And this is how we get into my entry into politics. That was supposed to be a 3-year gig. I was a year and a half into it when on the morning of February 15th, which was a Saturday, I woke up and read the news that the president overnight had fired the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Admiral C.Q. Brown. He had fired Admiral Lisa Franchetti, who was the chief of naval operations. And to me, most alarmingly, he had fired the lawyers that were on top of all the 3 branches. And when I read that news, my mind began to spin. I'm like, what might this mean? And the scenarios that kind of played out in my head were all bad. And I realized I was at a personal crossroads, that despite having this great job and more than a year and a half left in this position, and this really important role of preparing people to be leaders of character, I realized I would soon be being asked to do things that didn't match my moral code and might actually cause me to have to violate my oath of office, which I was not willing to do. So I made the decision to retire. I told my wife when she woke up that I had big news, that, this thing is over. And then within about a week or so of making that decision, I didn't retire immediately. There's bureaucracy. So it took months before I actually retired. But the 2 reasons I retired were, I've already mentioned one. It's about, I knew I was at a crossroads, and I just wanted to make sure that I always lived up to my oath. The second half of it was, when I did the math on my retirement game plan, if I stuck around, I wouldn't retire until the summer of 2026, which means I'd have to sit out the midterms. And these midterms are super important. And although military folks are allowed to vote, that's about the extent of their political activity. So I would have had to be on the sidelines and watch as the midterms unfolded without my participation. So I realized that I couldn't do that. So when I made the decision to retire, I also made the decision to get directly involved in partisan politics, which I'd never done before. And I started doing research on who can I help win? Here in Norman, I'm well represented by my city council, my mayor, the House members, the state legislature, my state senator are all phenomenal. And the first real gap I saw was in Congress. So I said, okay, how am I going to help someone get elected to Congress to beat Tom Cole? And I looked up who ran the last 4 times, and helping that person win wouldn't have been a good use of my time. So I kind of looked in the mirror and thought, is this really something I might do? So I went to ask some friends, am I crazy for thinking about running for Congress? And they said, absolutely.
I was about to say,
you should do it anyway. And so I actually made the decision probably in late February last year, but I wasn't allowed to tell anybody. I wasn't allowed to be open about that. And those 200 days of knowing what I wanted to do, but not being able to do it, were a really long 200 days just for the anticipation. Add to that the near immediate realization that my predictions that kind of prompted me to do this were way less than what was actually happening. It was way worse. It got way worse really fast. So September 1st couldn't come long enough. And I can talk more about that transition moment, but since I've talked so long without letting you have a chance, I'll stop there.
You're good. I appreciate it. And that's an amazing story. And definitely some of the things that I wanted to talk about, I think I'm very interested in your perspective. But the first thing that I wanted to ask about was kind of your district. So obviously, once you decided to run, one of the things you're doing is going around and talking to people in your district. Obviously, a lot of people in your district. What what are those pain points that are pretty common in your district? What are people telling you that they feel, where they're feeling the squeeze, where they want change from that status quo, from the normalcy that we've been seeing in Congress, in government?
Yeah, so it's funny that when I first decided to run, and I was talking to people in the political world, especially as I got close to actually announcing. Someone asked me what are your top 5 things? And I should have been, but I wasn't prepared for that question in this meeting. So the first 5 things that fell out of my mouth must have been the right things, because they're still on my walk card today. The very first thing that came out of my mouth was about the constitutional, what I call restoring constitutional balance. And my perception is that the president of the United States, the executive branch, has amassed so much power. And this isn't unique to President Trump. This has been happening for a long time. The difference now is that we have a president who is perfectly willing to use every bit of that power and continue to push the boundaries of it. And getting Congress back on the job to doing their part, to fulfilling their duties, is my number one objective. And when I say this to answer your question, because when I first said that and I first started in public speaking, I kind of described that as a wonky, non-sexy thing. But the truth is, that's one of those things that's resonating highest. When I talk to people and I tell them I'm running against Tom Cole, often their first reaction is they want to give me a big hug because they're sick of it. And it's not because Tom Cole is a bad guy. That's the guy I'll beat in November. It's not because he's a bad guy. He was actually he's been very well liked. But they have now recognized, and this is true certainly for Democrats, but a lot of Republicans I'm talking to, and independents certainly, they recognize that Congress generally, and Tom Cole specifically, are not meeting the moment. They are at AWOL. They're not doing their job. So people are really concerned about that. And there's just, you flip on the news, and like every day there's at least something that points directly to that. So that's my number one objective, and I used to describe it as non-sexy, but it resonates huge. The second thing that people always talk about is economic stuff, and there's kind of a basket there. People talk about affordability, so the tariffs that are making everything more expensive, making it harder to do business. The minimum wage, Oklahoma's minimum wage is still $7.25, which is remarkable. That's going to go up for a vote this year, which hopefully will pass. And the other thing is medical care, which I wrap up into my economic, kind of sub point. And I'm an advocate for universal health care. I enjoyed amazing socialized medicine when I was in the Air Force for 35 years. And I would wish that upon every one of my neighbors. It's worth it, and it's great. So, those are the things I hear the most from when I'm on the campaign trail. When I talk to Republicans, especially hardcore ones, obviously that they want to talk about ICE, they want to talk about immigration, and I'm okay to have those conversations. I think those are valid conversations to have and things to talk about. But I'm a first things first kind of guy, right? You got to tackle the big problems first, and there are some marginal issues that people like to hang their hats on that kind of drive up emotion and get people fired up. I'm not saying those are unimportant, but that's not day to day what matters. We need to save this patient. I use this trauma surgeon analogy because I've been binging The Pit. I see myself politically as a trauma surgeon. My job in Washington is to save this patient, and then we can do the stuff to make it pretty later. But we got to go in and fix it right now.
Yeah. So that kind of also goes into something that I find really important. Obviously, we're living in a time where Republicans and Democrats, identity politics as a whole is just become a very unavoidable thing, very difficult thing to navigate. How have you noticed your interactions with especially far right Republicans in your district, but also when you win, and are at DC? How do you see Congress working in a time where there may be a lot of talking, like there's conversation going on in the back, and you hear people say, well, they actually don't like these, but no one ever stands up and actually does anything. How do you see that kind of thing working once you get to Congress too?
Yeah, that's a really great question, because the first thing I always have to remind people is, Tom Cole, he's been in there for he'll be going on 24 years by the time he has to move out. And he's the chair of the House Appropriations Committee. So he's ascended to a really important position. When I get there, they're not giving me that chair, right? That's not what happens to freshman congressman. But that is not going to, I don't say that to minimize my impact, because the fact is, it just, the math is, if I'm going to Congress, there's been a blue wave, right? There's no doubt about it, which means I'm going to show up to Washington, D.C. with this whole raft of people, either a bunch of returning champions from the Democratic Party, but a lot of new faces there. And my goal is to, we're going to pop the champagne when we win and have a big party when we get there, but we need to get to work immediately. And that work needs to include the Republicans and independents and other folks in Congress. Because if we walk into Congress as a Democrat majority, and we start imposing our will on the Republicans, kind of dunking on them because they lost, they blew it, et cetera, we're going to feed the narrative that already helps give the Democrats a terrible reputation, certainly here in Oklahoma. But it's also not good governance. There are good people and smart people that are in the other party, and right now there are some constraining forces on their willingness to speak out. And while that it frustrates me that someone doesn't have the courage to lose their job to do the right thing in some cases, I'm not going to let that get in the way of me doing outreach to find people who share my values. And I know there are people in Congress, and people will get to Congress that aren't in our party, that have good ideas, and we need to have those conversations, and we need to demonstrate leadership in Washington, D.C., transparent, stand-up leadership, and be willing to. The way I put it is, we got to eat our veggies, right? We need to do the hard work of fixing this government. Yeah. And that we can't do that alone. We can't do that with party line votes. It just reinforces the bad taste people already have for both parties and for politics in general. So I'm going to go there, and I'm going to seek out anybody who's willing to have a good faith discussion about what's next. And because of my background, I'll be looking for veterans, and the number of veterans that are running are Democrats right now is huge. There's a big upswing, and I don't think that's by accident. I think there's a lot of people like me who raised their right hand when they were very young and made a promise to do something, and many of us don't see that as a promise that ends when our service does. So I'll be on the lookout for other veterans who want to help fix this. I already know right now there's veterans in Congress right now in the Republican Party that I would sit down with and start hashing some stuff out. And I'll say one other thing that you didn't ask, but I think is probably worth touching on here before someone accuses of me of being this like middle ground milk toast. I'm not a milk toast guy. I'm a progressive dude, right? I tell people all the time, if I could do the and change the world, it would be super progressive. But here's the thing. That's not what a representative's job is. A representative's job isn't to go to Washington and impose their will on the world. It's to carry the water of their district with them to Washington and find a way to make that a reality without violating their core values in the Constitution. So what that means for me is I need to have conversations with people that didn't vote for me, that will never vote for me, and ask them what matters in their life. And I need to understand, because I'm not a rural guy. I grew up in suburban Southern California, and I've lived in small towns, but I'm basically a city guy. I need to have conversations with farmers, ranchers, cattle producers, people that work in the oil and natural gas industry. I need to know what makes them tick and what matters to them. And if I disregard them, then I will be committing the same failure in leadership that I see right now in many Republicans in red states who dismiss the left and say your ideas don't matter. They created a bumper sticker moniker for us, accusing us of being woke or wanting to see our country overrun by bad people, which is it's nonsense to begin with, but it's also not helpful, and we're never going to dig out of this terrible mess we're in by doing it with one party doing it at a time.
Yeah. This one of the reasons that I was excited as I was researching you about having this conversation is as someone who has been in the Air Force, I think you and I've so far I've already interviewed one other veteran, and I love it. You guys are always give a really good perspective on this. So obviously, one of the things that happened recently is us going into Venezuela, and but also more than that, just since this administration has come into office, our place on the world stage has diminished greatly. Regardless of where it kind of ends, how we're obviously not going to be having our, a seat at the table in some places where we used to. We're obviously not respected in the same way that we used to. There's, regardless of whether something happens with Greenland and NATO, something happens with NATO because of which would obviously be horrible. There's tension now. Where do you see America's place in foreign affairs in the world moving forward after something like this happened?
Yeah, I would love to say that the end of the Trump administration and the emergence of a new Democratic presidency, which is of course what I'm hoping for in 2028. I would love to say that would just the world would look at us and say, okay, good to go. But that's 100% not going to happen. And the reason I know that is because when Trump lost the 2020 election, the world kind of did that. And it's kind of those fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me things. So I think we're going to have to walk around the world. Whoever our Secretary of State is after Secretary Rubio is going to have to go on a tour of the world and try to rebuild trust. And we shouldn't be a bit surprised that our adversaries are skeptical. But I think some of our longest allies are going to be extremely skeptical, and they'd be crazy not to be. We are already seeing the adverse impacts of it today. And for those that aren't in the military, they may not appreciate how incredibly valuable it is, and how much we rely on intelligence sharing with our allies. I promise, and I don't have a security clearance anymore. I was read out of everything when I retired, but I guarantee every single one of our allies in NATO thinks twice before they share anything with us right now. And they're going to think twice about joining us on any operations, because I think they've lost faith in our ability to maintain the moral high ground that we used to have. So it's going to take a lot of diplomacy. We may have to do a fair amount of, proving, showing our work before someone's going to let us back in the fold. And perhaps most importantly, it's not just the presidency that makes these decisions. The role of Congress is massive. That we have a Congress who has thus, at least in recent history, advocated its responsibility when it comes to matters of national defense. Has not used the power of the purse to constrain an executive that may be overstepping. So even if we have a better president, I think if I were one of our allies or former allies or someone that we had hoped to have partner with this, I would, if I were them, I'd be looking at our Congress saying, is this a reliable body of people who have their country's best interests at heart and are going to be reliable partners in doing really hard work? And that's a thing that people often forget. It's not just about signing a treaty and saying we're good. It's hard work to maintain these relationships. It costs money to maintain these relationships. Training and interoperability matters are things that are developed over decades. And any small interruption runs the risk of resetting something back to a prior state. And to the extent that we are abandoning the world stage, we're leaving room for other people to step in. And, this Greenland thing is a fascinating example. And, having been stationed in Germany, early in my career, and my pilot training was a Euro NATO operation. And I worked in Alaska, and I had deep ties to the NORAD mission, which is a joint U.S.-Canadian mission. Mm-hmm. The complexity of those operations and those endeavors, it can't be overstated. And we if we go to NATO, or sorry, excuse me, if we go to Greenland and blow up NATO, I don't know how it survives. And if NATO is broken, it will be, I think it will be one of the largest blemishes on our American history since slavery. I honestly think that the worldwide impact and the long-term consequences of that, generations of people will suffer if NATO dies.
Yeah, and I would also add, at least for the long term, just from an outside point of view, how could this administration has shown that it does not matter what a new president or a different party coming into power does, if the next president from a different party can come in and just erase everything that was done in the same. So yeah, I agree. It definitely is. It's going to take a lot of work and time to prove that we can be trusted on the world stage. I would agree with that.
And national security is not unlike business, right? People want stability, predictability. We have provided neither.
Yeah. So one of the other questions I like to ask is a little future casting. So we get through the general election, you win. We get to January 2nd, I think, is when the House gets sworn in. What is that top priority? What is that first thing that if you could, what is that first thing that you would want to work on? What's that first priority?
Oversight, government oversight. That meets my number one objective when it comes to constitutional balance. That larger project includes installing new mechanisms and safeguards into our government that didn't already exist. And I'll back up for a second and say that, the way our government was constructed, here in this, in law over the years, has kind of carried with it an assumption that we wouldn't allow scoundrels to assume high office, or if someone did make it there and were discovered to be scoundrels, we would quickly dispense with them. Which means effectively we had a government that a lot of the stability and predictability I talked about before was based on a handshake and people just expecting good behavior from people who've taken an oath to the Constitution.
Yeah.
We've proven that's not true, which means we need to rebuild. We need to build some new things into the system. We can't do that on day one, but we can do on day one is demand accountability. So full investigations, real oversight with real consequences, subpoenas, deep investigations, independent investigations, contempt if that's merited, and uncover every element where congressional oversight belongs. And I'm not even talking about inventing new oversight. I'm just talking about asserting the power that already exists in Congress that seems to only get exercised when the party out of power runs. There's a party in Congress that's the majority that's different than the presidency. They're really good at doing that. And when in the 2012 is that right now, the 2010 midterms, the shellacking that President Obama got, his administration spent the next 6 years in testifying. Well, we're going to bring that back, and that should be true regardless, right? So if I'm in Congress and reelected, I'm getting ahead of myself, but for the hypothetical, this helps. If I'm reelected and we get a Democratic president, you can bet that I'm going to be just as interested in providing real oversight and accountability to a Democratic administration as I am a Republican one, because that's not what this is about. Our Constitution doesn't talk about which party gets to do what. This is one system, and I would really love for the current members of Congress to take my hint on that, because they're not doing it right now. And the recent the invitation that's getting a lot of news that for the Clintons to come testify regarding the Epstein files is getting all this attention. Well, where's everybody else? Where are all the rest of the subpoenas? Just the Clintons? I mean, that's transparent. That's targeted transparent. I want there to be transparency on all matters, and it shouldn't be based on your political affiliation. That's not how it's supposed to work. It's very frustrating to watch.
It is very frustrating. I agree. And that actually really perfectly goes into the next thing I wanted to ask about, which is accountability, government accountability. Obviously, there's a very big problem. It doesn't matter which side of the aisle you're on. To be honest, there is lack of trust in our government, in the people that have been there for a long time, in the other side. It doesn't matter which side you're on. There feels it. Everything that comes out of the mouth of a politician at this point feels like you don't know if they're telling you the truth, especially when you hear stories about them, whether it's Republicans saying they don't like Trump, or they don't like what's going on, and then you find out that they vote for all this stuff, things such as that. How do you see accountability for you as assuming you become a congressman, but how do you plan on showing that specifically to your district, if not the country as a whole?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it resonates beautifully here in the 4th District, where Tom Cole doesn't come back to the district and do public appearances. If he's in public, it's a curated audience, small back room somewhere. I won't say smoke filled, but a back room somewhere that I'm not invited to. No town halls, no willingness to take direct feedback from the constituents. And that lack of transparency and that lack of accountability is noticed. I'm going to spend as much time back in the district as I can while not missing out on my duties in Washington, D.C., not just because I love Norman and my friends and family are all here. This is where I'm going to retire. I didn't buy a home here strategically so I could qualify for office. If I was going to do that, I would have picked maybe a place that'd be easier to win, right? This is my home, and this is where my friends and family are.
Yeah.
But when I'm home for the district, I'm going to be in theaters and halls welcoming all and saying, hey, bring it. With my, not just a one-way video that's posted saying, here's my accomplishments, don't forget to donate to my reelection campaign. That's not what representation is supposed to be about. So that's number one. It's about being present. And then it's about as much accountability as you can provide, not just on what you're accomplishing, but talking about the reasons behind it. And I've had it to hear with people gaslighting people about what is true and what is false. And the American people can be forgiven for not trusting politicians, because politicians generally, when they talk to an audience, they ask themselves, what does this group of people want to hear from me? And then they say that. And then the next group, they say something different to a different group of people. That's not sustainable. That's not my style. And what I tell folks is, I'm going to do my best for you, and I'm always going to tell you the truth. And if you don't like the truth, the answer, then you can be mad at me and not vote for me next time. And if that means I lose my job, well, that's politics. I lose my job, but I'm not going to lie to someone and tell them some fantasy story that's not true. And I'm also going to tell people, I need to lead by example. And this is a really important point that I think is missing nationally. It's not entirely absent, but I don't see it in the politics I watch closely. We need to stop demonizing each other. I'll may point some spears at Tom Cole in case I need to defeat him, and I'll have disagreements with the president on his policy. Although I have to be careful about that because I'm a military retiree, and I end up get the Mark Kelly treatment if I'm not careful. But we need to stop demonizing people. That includes my fellow politicians who are in office with me. But it really means I need to lead by example and not demonize my neighbors. And this, social media being what it is has, while there's some upsides to it, the downside is we have been tricked as a nation into splitting in half between neighbors. And there's nobody in the world that's going to convince me that my neighbor is my enemy. It's never going to happen. And we may disagree politically on issues of, deep importance to me, but they're human beings. They're my neighbors. They deserve to be represented. They deserve to be listened to, treated with humanity. And if we disagree on something, maybe start with the assumption that they arrived at that position from a place of honesty, and their worldview is a natural consequence of how they were raised, the experiences they had. And I haven't been through those, so it's unfair of me to say, there's something wrong with you for believing something different. Let's maybe start with humanity, ask questions, and the internet, through a screen, there's a filter that allows people to kind of mean it. It's really hard to hate someone when you're looking them right in the eye, face to face. So I'm going to spend as much time as I can with people, eye to eye, coffee shops, living rooms, and listening, because I'm not the smartest guy in the room. I'm a pretty smart dude, but I'm not the smartest guy in the room. There's stuff I don't know. I don't know anything about running a farm. I don't know anything about the oil and natural gas industry. I didn't read from a book. So I think listening is the first step, and trust comes from that moment of like showing a little bit of vulnerability, of saying, I don't know. So please help me understand. That's what I'm trying to do. And sometimes it works. Some people don't want to hear it. Some people, see the D next to my name. They see me as a Democrat and they assume I'm some kind of, crazy person or monster. I do my best to get us back to the core issues, but to the extent I'm successful, it's been pretty great conversations.
Yeah. Well, you definitely picked a difficult time in that respect. And as someone who agrees with you, there are a lot of people that were hurt by a lot, and by a lot of things that are going on, especially from this administration. And it takes people like you standing out and being different, just like it takes someone like me standing out and being different, because there are a lot of people that have been hurt in a lot of ways that they can't interact with their neighbor sometimes in the same way that we can. So I appreciate you saying that, and that I know that means a lot to people in my community, that to see people running for office that are willing to step out and do that kind of hard work. So so I think closing out, if you had one thing that anyone that was listening or watching this, that you would like them to come away with, what would that one thing be? And then if you want to let people know where they can find you, if they want to check more out about you, and how they can support you.
Yeah, you bet. And these two things are going to be very closely related, and they're pretty self-serving. So sorry, this is what it's going to be, but it's the truth. I told you the most common reaction I get when I tell people I'm running for Congress is they want to hug me because they're sick of it. The second most common thing people say is, but you can't beat Tom Cole. And my feedback to them is, not with that attitude, we can't. So what I need people to take away from this conversation is, this is a winnable race. The math is against us. I'm not disputing that, but this is not what it used to be. This is a R+17 district, in the last few years, last few cycles. But the national wave is changing, and that affects Oklahoma. And just because that there was a national generic congressional poll that D+14. So, if this was R+17 and that D14 applies, one might say, well, we're okay, it's only R+3. I don't believe that's true, but it's closer than people think. And not only is it closer than people think, Tom Cole has never faced a challenger like me. He's faced some good people. He's faced some fine people. The last 4 cycles, he faced a nice enough person, but didn't have the fight or the fundraising to do this. This is a winnable race, but we have to decide it's winnable. And the second important point is, just because you're not in the 4th district, as I described in the intro, doesn't mean this race doesn't matter to you. Every single American is impacted by Tom Cole's lack of leadership and his inability and unwillingness to uphold his oath of office. So if you're in New York or Miami or Sheboygan, you are adversely impacted by Tom Cole, which is now it gets very self-serving, which means that the $5 or $10 you donate to my campaign will help you. And I know a lot of people have local races they care about. That's great. If you're supporting a local candidate that is passionate and you need them to win for your day-to-day existence to be better, bring it. But if you have an extra $5 or $10 to spare and you want to make history and show the world that despite not having a really professionalized campaign apparatus in Oklahoma, because we've been kind of left in the dust for a while, this is winnable. This is absolutely winnable. And that just a few bucks are going to make a huge difference. So if they go to my website, it's pixleyforcongress.com, which is my last name, the word for congress.com. I have an Act Blue there. And if someone wants to donate just literally $5 or $10 a month or $5 a month for the rest of this campaign from across the nation, will help us compete. I'm never going to outraise Tom Cole, though. That's probably worth noting. He already has $6 million in the bank. He takes APAC money, takes corporate money. I'm not taking APAC money. I'm not taking corporate PAC money. Not that they're offering yet, but they will. Once this podcast goes out there and everybody's like,
right.
"Holy crap,
exactly.
Who's this guy?" The phone's going to be ringing off the hook, and I'm not answering. I'm not taking that money, which means it's down to individual people to bankroll my campaign. And the other thing that I probably should tell people before they consider giving me money is, I also don't believe in self-funding. I'm not a millionaire, but even if I were, I've capped my own contribution to my campaign at $3,500, which is the same cap that if anybody wanted to give me money is the maximum number. And it's not because I couldn't afford to give more. I could have probably boosted my campaign significantly out of the gate by giving myself $50,000. But that's not how it ought to work. You shouldn't be able to buy your way onto the ballot. It should be based on ideas and values and integrity and convincing people you're worth investing in. So that's the approach I'm taking. And if people dig that, they can check me out on all the socials except X. I don't participate in X, but pretty much everywhere else you want to learn about me, you can see me talk. You'll hear a lot of the same things because my story doesn't change as I tell it. But I would love to take people's support, and they can reach out to the campaign at my website if they want to volunteer. Even if they're not local, there's ways to help remotely. And that's the last thing I'd say is, if maybe you don't have $5 to donate to my campaign, cool. Do you have 1,000 followers on one of the socials? Share my video, share this, and get the word out, because I need nationwide help. And if people I like this guy's style, sharing will actually drive up my participation and get me those small dollar donors I'm going to need, kind of Bernie style.
Yeah. I completely agree. Jeff, thanks for sitting here and spending time with us. Everyone else who listened and got this far, thank you for being here. Please consider liking and subscribing if you like what we do here. And we'll put all of Jeff's contact socials and stuff in the description below. Just so everyone who is listening to this maybe for the first time knows, the Breaking the Meta is all about hard conversations, important conversations, breaking the status quo. We firmly believe that all people, no matter your race, religion, gender, or identity, deserve rights, respect, dignity, and safety. And that is something we will fight for continually on this channel. Again, Jeff, thank you for being here. Appreciate you. And I look forward to seeing what the future holds for your campaign. And everyone else who's watching, we'll see you next time on Breaking the Meta. Bye, guys.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me.